Britain's biggest supermarket retailer has 3,627 stores nationwide,
Thank you for shopping at Tesco.
with almost 50 million shopping trips a week and a turnover of £57 billion a year.
We're managing huge variables, making sure that we have the right products in the right shops at the right time.
It's a company that's been part of British life for over a century.
Excuse me, when are you closing?
Oh, you've got a few hours yet, madam.
Grab it.
But the tale of this retail giant is one of high-stakes risks.
How we got through the next 2 or 3 years, I really don't know.
Game-changing innovations
All the checkout girl has to do is pass the code label over the window, and the laser underneath reads out the code.
and fierce rivalries.
I can remember my boss at the time saying, "Those Yanks are parking their tanks on our lawn. We can't let them do that."
And it all began with a barrow boy
I'm really a trader. My business is buying and selling.
who became a knight of the realm, but who never quite left the East End behind.
If I might be very rude, you can't do business sitting on your house.
At perhaps the most difficult time in its 101-year history,
We were thrust into the middle of it. It's been hugely challenging for everybody.
this is the story of how Tesco became a supermarket giant, told by the people past and present
Yes, I'm the superhero in this store.
who made the company what it is today.
Sorry, my axe fell off.
It's 8:30 on a Friday morning at the Newmarket Extra in Suffolk.
Morning, Matt.
Manager Alistair is walking the floor.
It's quite impactful, isn't it, the club card prices yet?
A daily ritual at the start of every shift to make sure everything in the store is as it should be.
I look after the overall running and operation of the shop, but my most important job is basically making sure that we look after the colleagues, because if you look after the colleagues, they look after the customers.
Good staff morale is good for business. Alistair manages a store with 550 employees. And in a service industry like supermarket retail, the jobs done by people working with customers are critical.
Morning, Pat. Been busy this morning?
Thanks, David. What?
So walking the floor isn't just about checking every area in the store, it's about checking in with the staff.
I genuinely believe that if colleagues are happy at their work, they will do a much better job, they'll go the extra mile, and they'll come to their work with a smile on their face, and I think that is so important. Morning, ladies. Counters are looking lovely. Do you like the new display?
Yeah, it's lovely.
I really would describe the environment as a sort of family environment. Morning.
And for some of the staff at Newmarket, like Sarah, their colleagues don't just feel like family.
My son was a team leader on the checkouts. If he bossed me about too much, he'd get one less sausage on his dinner.
On the fish counter, Kate is the second generation from her family to work at Tesco.
My mum used to work in the cafe and then she moved on to the deli. And she said, "Don't worry, I won't be long." And she was like here for about 10 years as well.
Kate's been at the company for almost 20 years. She's the most highly trained level of fishmonger.
These are the rainbow trout and they are my favourite.
But she never takes her work home with her.
I don't actually eat fish, but shouldn't have admitted to that, should I? But I don't eat fish, but I hear salmon and cod's very good. Yes. I can't believe I admitted it.
In its 101-year history, Tesco has changed beyond all recognition. After World War II, its transformation was powered by two pioneering innovations that changed the way Britain shopped: self-service and supermarkets. But at every stage of its reinvention, the bottom line has depended on customers coming back.
The retail industry is highly competitive, it's very dynamic, anybody can shop anywhere at any time. It means you've kind of got to be on it all of the time.
In the retail business today, customer loyalty is hard-earned. When there are so many other options available, shoppers' experiences, good or bad, decide where they spend their money.
It's a people business. You know, our job is to serve customers. It's full of people doing that. You're right, sir. Can I help you?
Right where coleslaw might be.
Well, it's just down here, sir.
Oh, it's lurking, is it?
Yeah. So my job is to make sure that all of the people in my team, all 300,000 of them, are clear about what it is we've got to do, and they're motivated to do it, and they've got the resources and support to do that.
The senior management spend part of every week in stores. The UK CEO and Global Chief Operating Officer have both been at the company for 30 years and learned the business from the ground up.
One of the good parts about having friends across the business is they keep you honest. So my friends that are store managers never think twice about sending me messages and texts about how things really are. Making big decisions at a senior level, that makes them easier when you've got people that are not scared or not backwards at coming forwards.
At the start of the pandemic in 2020, those reports from staff on the ground made a crucial difference to the response from headquarters.
We stopped trying to do things from the centre. We went to where they were in the stores and we listened to them. And from then on in, all of our actions were driven by the actions that our colleagues in the stores and distribution centres on the delivery vans were telling us needed to be done.
During the first lockdown, there were new additions at the Newmarket Extra.
Throughout the COVID crisis, we were very quickly able to give 120 local people jobs, which was wonderful in all the gloom of COVID. Yeah. Okay, keep me updated.
Hamish is one of the 4,500 new home delivery drivers hired during the coronavirus crisis.
I have a wine tour business based in Bordeaux, Burgundy and Champagne. But on March the 13th, Friday the 13th, I was in Bordeaux and I was the last visit at Chateau Lafite Rothschild, and then they closed the doors. So I flew back and started work at Tesco's a week afterwards.
While he can't take clients on tours of the wine regions in France, Hamish is on the road delivering customers shopping in Suffolk.
Wanted to just do something positive, something to help, something to, you know, at the end of the day, to put money in my pocket and keep the lights on.
The calibre of the people that have joined us has been absolutely incredible from just every single walk of life, and they've very quickly fitted into the family. Morning, Sophie.
And do you know everyone's name?
I would say with confidence I know everybody's name. Morning, Kath. How are you? Morning. It's something I sort of try to pride myself on. Hence why I also push heavily on the name badges, just so I make sure I can absolutely identify them by name. Morning, Sue.
Alistair might try and create a family atmosphere for his team in Newmarket. But there was a time when Tesco actually was a family firm. And just like the senior management today, the company's founder was no stranger to the shop floor.
Sir John Cohen believes in meeting the people. It's perfectly natural. He started as a barrow boy and has never forgotten it.
By 1971, Jack Cohen was a legendary figure in British retail. The founder of Tesco had started out in London street markets with stalls run by his cousins and nephews.
I really started in the very, very bottom, and the success that I have achieved has been to choosing the right men, the right people. My own family are in the business today.
In Jack Cohen's day, Tesco was a family affair. His sons-in-law, Leslie Porter and Hyman Kreitman, both had key roles in the business.
Hyman Kreitman was a very well-educated, very quiet, very nice, studious man. Leslie was very much like Jack, and Leslie gave Jack as good as he could get.
It was not always easy for them being the sons-in-law of Jack Cohen. He was not shy to tell them if he didn't agree with them, and some of those discussions took place in the boardroom. So it was a very family-orientated business, but I don't know if it was entirely harmonious.
By 1971, Jack Cohen was a multi-millionaire, credited with being the man who'd given Britain supermarkets. But just over a quarter of a century earlier, things were very different. At the end of World War II, Jack had only 100 small shops, and they were struggling to turn a profit. It would take a retail revolution and the birth of the modern supermarket to turn things around at Tesco. This is the story of Britain's biggest retailer, from its origin on a single market stall to the supermarket giant it is today. But this is a company that's come a long way from its early days as a discount retailer ruled by Jack Cohen. Jack Cohen was the governor to his employees when he was at the helm, and managers were all addressed formally. The company culture today is very different. Everyone from CEO to checkout staff is known by their first name. That's not necessarily what their colleagues call them, though.
My nickname is Poshbird. I like things to look right, I like to be turned out correctly, I like to wear my jewellery.
The rest of the store managers, they would call me King Tino.
My colleague called me Clezza, which I quite like.
Some people call me Positive Vibes.
It's handy that I'm from Essex.
Well, my nickname is Mr. Merlot, which is quite flattering because I like the Merlot grape variety.
Get called many names here. Like Harry Potter, okay. You're Harry Potter from now on.
Arthur has been working at the Brent Cross Superstore for 5 years.
My first day, I was so shy. Everyone thought I was mute. I literally introduced myself to the managers and sat on the end till and didn't say a word for 9 hours.
He started out on the tills, but Arthur's job now is making sure customers get the speediest service possible at the checkout. He's a queue buster, specialising in rapid response.
Yes, I'm the superhero in this store. If I see it's busy somewhere, I'll just go to that area and just get rid of the queues. So it's really just a lot of running from one end of the store to the other end. Are you paying by cards? I think the community around here is a really tight one. You see the same people every day. You see one at the end? I know them personally now. Let me take the tag off for you. Strange request for a customer that I've got is to take their shopping home. I kind of thought it was odd, but it was funny at the same time. I just helped her to a car.
Self-scan checkouts were first piloted in Tesco stores in 2003. But self-service shopping has been around for so long, it's hard to believe it was ever seen as revolutionary. When historians at the British Library recorded interviews with Tesco staff for the National Archives in 2005, some of them remembered what the early shops were like before self-service.
And it was a roll-up shutter shop. And in the morning you put about 50 different baskets and bins of stuff out on the pavement, like a market square. I can imagine Sir John doing it.
We were seen as a very cheap and nasty retailer compared with Sainsbury's.
They were the enemy. And we hated if a Sainsbury's store opened near one of your stores. We hated because the customers loved it.
Jack Cohen's first shops weren't that different from the market stalls he started with. But just like in more upmarket grocers, customers had to queue up to be served at a counter.
Today is Victory in Europe Day.
It was the end of nearly 6 years of war in Europe. All over the capital, as indeed in towns and cities throughout the country, it was the same story.
In 1945, Jack Cohen had 100 small shops in and around London. But peace didn't bring the end of wartime rationing.
Ask any housewife who's put up with 6 years of war what she thinks today, and this is her answer.
It's far worse now than it was during the war.
Post-war Britain is a pretty depressing place. A war might have been won, but life does not return to what it was like before the Second World War.
Britain was in a really difficult economic position, and this is why rationing went on for so long. Austerity did have a big effect on daily life, and it was still difficult to get foodstuffs, and queuing continued to be a big problem in the shops.
Since he started in street markets, Jack's success had been based on his pile it high, sell it cheap strategy. But the low prices that attracted customers depended on shifting large volumes of goods quickly.
In the very early days of Tesco, a lot of the brand image was attached to price. And so long as he could consistently have low price produce, he was maintaining his brand image.
With goods scarce, Jack's business model wasn't working, and his stores weren't making much money. He needed to cut costs and increase sales. A trip to the United States offered a radical solution.
I saw these supermarkets in America and I thought that our small stores, although they were so small, that would be the beginning of it.
In post-war America, only half the food retailers were self-service, but they had around 80% of sales. Instead of queuing at a counter, customers filled their baskets themselves.
Jack was a little bit sceptical about whether self-service would work in Britain. People were slightly nonplussed about not being served.
They would have seen counter service as something that enhanced their class status. So you go into a shop and you're essentially kind of waited on by someone who shows you appropriate deference.
Jack decides to take a gamble on this American invention and try self-service in a store in St Albans.
The company's first experiment with self-service in 1947 didn't take off. 2 years later, Jack's eldest son-in-law, Hyman Kreitman, convinced him it was the solution to falling profits.
A transatlantic phenomenon has at last made its mark in British shops. The self-service store.
How do you like the self-service? Oh, I think it's fine. I find it saves me an awful lot of time in the mornings. It's so handy if you only want one article. You can just pop in and take it off the shelf and pop off again quickly without any queues. So much nicer.
Jack wasn't the only one to try it. The Co-op had opened a self-service shop too. Some customers weren't keen on helping themselves, but self-service was a game changer for retailers.
The move to self-service is the first time that customers are co-creating the service experience, and the cost of running that service is a lot cheaper now. Essentially, this was a way to increase efficiencies and increase profitability.
Daisy Hyams, who'd been Jack Cohen's right-hand woman since 1929, recalled the impact the self-service revolution had on the business later in her career.
By 1950, we were operating 8 self-service stores, because by being self-service, you cut down your labour costs and you could afford to sell more competitively.
We revolutionised all our shops. Our stores started taking so much more money. I couldn't believe it myself.
Tesco's move to self-service was, in the grocery world, an absolute seismic shift. And that is basically the beginning of supermarket retailing as we know it in Britain today.
Self-service was Jack Cohen's response to post-war austerity. And with money tight for shoppers, he bought goods wholesale and repackaged them with his own labels to offer lower prices. Supermarkets' own brand products nowadays are a much more complex business. Normally, around 6,000 people work at Tesco's headquarters in Welwyn Garden City.
Good morning, welcome to Tesco. How can I help you?
With most people working remotely, head office is a lot quieter than usual. But there's still something cooking in the development kitchens.
We work as part of an inspiration chef development team. So we're all about coming up with new ideas and new concepts and then implementing them into new products and new product development.
Neil is one of 4 chefs in the product development team. It's a department of more than 50 people with a very wide brief.
I look after regulatory compliance, factory standards, through to our product development, all the way through to environment and sustainability. So we look at what we have to do, what customers want, future trends, and how we combine them together.
The own label market is booming in Britain. It's now worth an estimated £62 billion, and Tesco's share is around £18 billion. There are 10,000 own brand food products on sale, and this is where the new ones begin.
This is probably one of my favourite recipes that I've been a part of working on, so it's a lovely chicken and potato pie. Nice for the winter, really indulgent and really tasty. I think us four have probably four of the coolest jobs in Tesco. We're always out seeking new ideas, exploring new techniques and ingredients.
Once the chefs have perfected a new recipe, it's tested with customers and rolled out with help from a supplier.
The chefs come up with those initial recipes, and then we would look at how we could then make a lot more of that product. So in a kitchen like this, we would be making one pork pie, whereas in our factories, we literally make millions of pork pies. There's no mystery to a lot of the products that we make. We use the same ingredients that you would use in your kitchen at home, but we just use it on a much bigger scale.
Adapting a new recipe for manufacturing in the millions takes months. So coming up with new products that customers will want to buy means trying to predict the future.
We have a team of experts that work on all different areas, working with universities and key academics that are thinking about what we need in the future. 5 years ago, we recognised that actually plant-based was something that people were asking for more.
Own label ranges often have higher profit margins, and retailers can use them to respond to consumer trends. There are now over 100 own brand plant-based products on the shelves.
There's a large part of the population today that just want to reduce the amount of meat that they're eating. So that is why we recreate everyday favourite products, but in a version that doesn't contain the meat. So we've made a totally plant-based Scotch egg. Instead of using a pork sausage meat around the egg, we've used a jalapeno mince. The egg isn't a typical egg. This egg is made out of tofu, and then it's coated in a crispy crumb.
And the proof of the plant-based pudding is in the eating for Neil.
I've been eating a plant-based diet personally for coming up to 2 years, and I kind of did that as a 6-week trial initially, just to understand it a little bit more. And then here I am today, still eating a plant-based diet and no intention of going back.
They might have different roles in the product development process, but Chef Neil and Supplier Neil both have the same sense of job satisfaction.
The best thing about my job is, having that 5 to 6 months working on a particular product and then walking down the aisle in Tesco and you say, oh, do you know what, I've worked on that.
It's very satisfying to think that we are feeding the nation. We're creating new recipes for everyone to enjoy. There's no downside to that in my mind.
Today's own label lines sell alongside branded goods, but the two haven't always coexisted so easily. When Jack Cohen moved from small shops into supermarkets, getting household name products at the right price meant going to war with the manufacturers of big name brands. Tesco is the biggest of the big 4 supermarkets, ahead of Sainsbury's, Asda and Morrison's.
Everyone else turned left and Tesco turned right.
But today's retail giant began with an East Ender who built an empire.
I'm really a trader. My business is buying and selling.
The 1950s were a time of huge expansion for Tesco. Jack Cohen bought up rival chains of small shops. But his next big idea was bigger stores.
In 1956, I think we started on the large supermarkets. And every year we say to ourselves, the supermarkets we're building today are not big enough.
Co-op and Premier Foods were already established retailers in supermarket formats. Jack Cohen came a little bit later because he realised the benefits of selling through supermarkets.
Although Jack Cohen had been very successful beforehand, now his business really took off. Britain was changing, and so was the way people wanted to shop.
In the latter half of the 1950s, Britain's shoppers had never had it so good. Unemployment was less than 2%, wages had risen, and car ownership had doubled.
Standards of living were rising, people had more disposable income, and of course fridges made a huge difference because you can go and do one big shop and bring it all home and put it in the fridge.
Jack opened his first supermarket at Malden in Essex in 1956. 3 years later, he made what was to prove one of his most important hiring decisions. Ian McLaurin.
I was the first trainee taken on by the company by Jack Cohen in 1959 with the enormous salary of £900 a year.
A former public school boy was a surprising recruit as Jack's first management trainee.
My mother looked at me and she said, Ian, she said, I haven't spent all this money on your education for you to join a company like that.
Jack's other new recruit in 1959 was a more likely candidate, his younger son-in-law, Leslie Porter. But neither of his sons-in-law always saw eye to eye with Jack.
Difficult to work with?
If you understand him, no. If you don't understand him, yes.
He's the most difficult person to work for because he changes his mind 50 times a day.
Former personnel manager Kath Batchelder recalled the impact of Jack's tempestuous family relations in her interview for the Tesco tapes.
There could be some rough patches because they all three had different points of view. So there was rumblings throughout the company.
Hyman and Leslie's push to modernise often clashed with Jack. But there weren't just battles inside the company. The move from small shops into supermarkets set Jack on a collision course with big-name brands.
I felt it was very unfair for manufacturers to compel us to sell at prices that we thought were too expensive for the public.
The resale price maintenance law gave manufacturers the right to set the prices of their products.
The problem with retail price maintenance was that Jack could quite simply not undercut his competitors, even if he wanted to. It was forbidden.
In 1960, with the opening of his biggest supermarket yet, Jack Cohen declared war on big brands.
Leicester has opened the first supermarket where you can very nearly drive up to the counter.
In a very public show of defiance against RPM, the prices of branded goods and clothes were cut at the new Leicester store. Jack Cohen became known as Jack the Slasher.
It's a Save-A-Lot Tesco. Tesco to the rescue to keep prices down.
Manufacturers took legal action. The court battles continued for 4 years, but in 1963, Hyman Kreitman found a new weapon in Jack's fight with the brands: Green Shield stamps.
News, news, news! Green Shields come to town, oh yeah. Green Shields come to town, say Green Shield stamps, say Green...
Trading stamps were an early loyalty scheme popular in the United States, but they hadn't been tried with shoppers in Britain.
You collected these books of stamps when you bought your shopping, and with those you could redeem them against a kettle or a toaster or something. And initially they were hugely popular because these items were expensive.
I was at the opening of our first store with Green Shield, and it was just amazing. I mean, the crowds absolutely loved them.
The stamps' popularity fueled the company's rapid growth. And in 1964, after years of campaigning, resale price maintenance was abolished. Jack Cohen had fought the law, and he'd won.
I feel very happy about whatever else I've done. I've certainly done that.
Jack Cohen really made it work for him and slashed prices of everyday items simply to get people through the doors.
Being able to sell goods at a cheaper price really paved the way for retailers like Jack to expand. And of course we can really see this now in the culture of supermarkets that we have today, where supermarkets are often competing to offer the cheapest prices.
The end of RPM meant big retailers could use their buying power to give customers lower prices. It supercharged Tesco's expansion, and it was the start of modern supermarket retailing. major supermarkets in the UK use just-in-time delivery models. It's a system that relies on ordering stock every day based on the demand in each store.
There is a lot of technology behind it, and it's important that we're as efficient and as accurate as possible.
Just-in-time supply chains means stores don't need to hold extra stock, reducing storage costs that would be passed on to customers.
The way it works is a customer buys a product, the product goes through the system realises it's sold it. Once a certain amount of them have been sold, the stock system orders it. It's constantly ordering, constantly making sure our stock is accurate as possible.
As items are scanned through the checkout, orders are sent to suppliers for delivery to distribution centres. The ordering system might be automated, but getting the right stock on every shelf in every shop still depends on people. Anita has been a picker at the Daventry Distribution Centre since 2011.
In a day, I pick around 2,000 units and I travel about 10 miles. Even more.
Each store in Britain gets its own unique orders delivered every day. Pickers in the 23 distribution centres around the country select the items for the specific cage that carries each store's stock.
This little computer tells me step by step what I need to do, and then after I scan product, it tells me how many units I need to pick.
Pick 2.
And to which cage I need to put it.
Go to 2219.
After a few days, you just do it automatically without even thinking. But it's all about your mindset. If you make it fun in your head, then you enjoy doing it.
And part of the fun is the distribution centre's soundtrack.
The music changes very often. We have 2 DJs and they make different playlists, but my favorite one are very quick one, because when you listen to quick music, you want to just work faster. When you listen Celine Dion, it's like, oh. It's true.
Power ballads don't work for what Anita likes most about her job.
There is a lot of heavy stuff we pick here, but keeps me fit. It's a little bit like fitness challenge, because you keep stepping out and in and out and in.
Go to Wild Out in Quebec.
Before each summer, I wear ankle weights, because 4 hours when you have it, and so I work on my ass. I'm sorry.
Anita is just one of 16,500 people working in distribution, and Christy is the newest recruit at Daventry.
I'm on the graduate scheme and I spend time within the warehouse working in the different departments and learning new skills, and one of these new skills is actually learning how to pick.
Like today's senior management who started as graduate trainees, Christy will do 2 years on the ground in the business. And learning to pick means learning to drive an electric low-level order picker.
So this is basically the test that we do for every new starter, including me. Don't judge me, I'm very new. The horns work, so we'll give it a go. I can drive a car, but it's a completely different way of driving.
Just 2 weeks into the job, Christy's still got the L plates on.
The pickers make it look so easy. Watching everybody chicane through the aisles, I thought, yeah, I can do this. And then I got on the thing and I was like, no, I can't. And that is the truth.
Before she can match the speed of the pros, Christy has to master the art of manoeuvring. She might not be the fastest picker in the warehouse yet.
I'm not even joking, that is the best I've ever done that.
But the newest recruit in the 1,800-strong team here is on her way. By 1969, Tesco had 834 stores, and Jack Cohen's name was on the New Year's honours list. His daughter, Shirley Porter, recalled the ceremony in her Tesco tape interview.
Oh, it was something very, very special. It was the most exciting thing for him. When he went forward to receive his knighthood, and they were playing Fiddler on the Roof, If I Was a Rich Man, and it was really very, very touching.
Jack's knighthood was obviously a monumental moment in his life. From a second-generation migrant to becoming a Knight of the Realm.
Really was a mark of how far he'd come and also how he was recognised really as having provided a service to British society.
It's a huge accolade and I think he loved every minute of it really.
50 years after his first market stall, Jack's knighthood was the pinnacle of his rags to riches rise. But the governor's days of running the shop were numbered. Times were changing and the next generation was coming. There are 3,627 Tesco stores in Britain. Keeping the shelves stocked at the nation's biggest supermarket retailer takes an operation of massive scale. But despite its size today, the success of this retail giant was by no means certain. There were many times in the last 101 years when things could just as easily have gone the other way. The 1960s was a boom time for Tesco. The company bought rival chains and opened bigger and bigger stores.
We are opening stores at the rate of possibly 50 a year, that's one a week.
By 1969, profits had risen to £10 million and Jack Cohen had become Sir John. But the self-made multi-millionaire never quite became a member of the establishment.
Jack went to all the social occasions and he had these tie-pins made, YCDBOYSA, and he gave them to everybody. I mean, the Prince Philip had one, Edward Heath had one, Margaret Thatcher had one, and they always asked the same question. What does it mean?
It means you can't do business sitting on your arse.
And that was Jack. He couldn't do business sitting on his arse, that's for sure.
But Sir Jack's way of doing business wasn't keeping pace with the times. Cracks were starting to show in the company's structure, and consultants were invited in. They advised that Hyman Kreitman took over as chairman.
It was hugely difficult for Jack to hand over. He'd built the company from a demob check to an enormous business. Giving that up must have felt like giving up a part of himself. Tesco quite literally has part of Jack's name in it. And I think part of Tesco was in Jack.
Sir Jack was never going to just leave the next generation to it.
He used to wander around creating havoc and used to come and give me a and all of that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, he always used to come into my office and say, well, good night, Ian, tomorrow's another day.
Sir Jack's clashes with his successors continued, and the climate outside the company was stormy too.
The 1970s was a difficult economic period for Britain. We see the oil crisis, we see three-day week, and in particular, high inflation, which would have driven prices up.
With inflation at 20%, shoppers wanted low prices, not free gifts. By 1977, Green Shield stamps were past their sell-by date.
Customers were giving the stamps back, and that bill was something like £20 million a year for us. And people just didn't want that promotion.
Leslie Porter had replaced Hyman Kreitman as chairman, but Sir Jack still had a seat on the board. Ian McLaurin's proposal to end Green Shield stamps sparked a showdown between the old guard and the new.
We then had this amazing board meeting where there was a vote, and it was 5-5. So Jack said, you're the chairman, Leslie, you have a casting vote. So we've won it, 6-5. So I said, I have spoken to the non-executive director, and he said, you have my vote, I can't stand the sticky little things. So I put this letter on the table and I said, excuse me, 6-5, we've won.
Sir Jack Cohen had never lost a vote in a board meeting before.
My office was next door to the boardroom, and he came out and he got hold of my lapels and he shook me and he looked at me in the eye and he said, it's all your bloody idea, and you know what's going to happen to you if it fails. And I said, yes, Dad, yes, I do. Yes, I'm quite aware of what's going to happen if it fails.
It was never just about Green Shield stamps. It was about perhaps the end of the Cohen era and the beginning of the era under Maclaurin.
If we hadn't come out of stamps, Tesco would not have survived. It would have been taken over and it would be no more.
The company would save the £20 million it spent a year on free gifts. But the multi-million-pound question was how to boost sales without them. Ian and his team staked everything on a massive price-cutting campaign. Operation Checkout.
We put big adverts in the paper saying you will have something more than stamps, better than stamps. And all the competition were wondering what on earth are Tesco going to do.
While the country celebrated the Queen's Silver Jubilee, Tesco closed their stores. The prices were kept secret, but the scale of discounting was very high risk.
We were gambling on achieving a sufficient level of turnover to pay for the new discounts.
We opened up after the Queen's Jubilee with 20-30% off of key lines.
To our astonishment, there was queues nearly half a mile long outside all our stores across the country.
It was all over the television, it was all over the press, it was absolutely amazing.
That kind of straightforwardness about their prices harks back in many ways to Jack Cohen's early days and goes back to the heart of Tesco's appeal to the mass mainstream, which is an honesty about prices.
The gamble had paid off. The increase in sales and profits from Operation Checkout saved the business.
Operation Checkout was our lifeblood. If we hadn't have done that, then I wouldn't be talking to you now. That was a crucial moment.
The company he had founded was entering a new era, but in 1979, Sir Jack Cohen's health was failing.
Jack was suffering from cancer, and we'd opened a big store at Pitsea in Essex, which was one of the biggest stores we'd opened at that time. I said to him, I'd love to be able to take you, not thinking ever I would.
Even though he was gravely ill, Jack couldn't resist getting a look at the new store from the shop floor.
I push him round the store, and people were all coming up to him and saying, Jack, this is fantastic. And you could see the old boy's face, and it was just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Ian took Jack up to the manager's office on the top floor for lunch.
You could look over this absolutely panoramic view of the store, and he looked around and tears were dropping down his cheek. And I said, are you all right, Governor? And he said, you know, Ian, he said, I never thought I'd see anything like this.
Jack died that night. It had been a fitting way for Sir Jack Cohen to spend his last day.
You start a business from absolutely nothing to see a magnificent store and think, this is me, Tesco.
News of the governor's passing hit the company hard.
Well, he's a legend. I mean, we had lost the boss. No more to say.
Sir Jack Cohen's death marked the end of an era at Tesco. In 60 years, the shop that Jack built had changed retail in Britain forever.
It's brought me a lot of happiness. I'm proud that we should have been the pioneers of what we've done.
Now, if you were a young man starting in business tomorrow, what trade would you go into?
I think I'd do the same as I've done before.
Sir John Cohen wins.
Well done, Sir John. Well done, well done, well done, well done.
Oh dear, what a life, eh? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay,
Matt. A lot of fun.
Next time, the master plan that transformed the company and took Tesco to #1.
Our customers liked us better than Sainsbury. I mean, it's that simple.
And the storms the business weathered to stay there.
At Tesco, they say every little helps. Now the once mighty retailer finds itself in need of all the help it can get.
And that's next Wednesday at 7 as new Inside Tesco continues. We've a trolley load of insider info new tomorrow on Channel 5 and secrets of your supermarket food. Join Sean Williams at 7. Next tonight, we meet people living with a harrowing condition that 1 in 4 of us will suffer from in our lifetime. Restless leg syndrome, desperate for help.